Initiating Movieboys podcast. Still loading. Tempest and Ryan are on their way. Welcome. Please enjoy the show.
And we are back with another episode of Movieboys. I am Ryan, and I'm here with my co-host Tempest.
Hello there.
And today we are going to be talking about the sequel, the long-awaited sequel. It's been 5 years to Into the Spiderverse, Across the Spiderverse. And before getting into it a little bit, I just wanted to, since we didn't talk about the first movie, thought I would ask, like, what were your thoughts on the first Spider-Verse movie?
Oh, I loved it. It was great. It was one of my favorite movies when it came out. I thought it was like it hit on all levels for me. It was a good kids movie. It was a good movie just for like adults. It was a good animation movie. It was a good Spider-Man movie. It was a good movie from Sony, because Sony really isn't the best at making movies, in my opinion.
God, no, they're not.
Yeah, so I thought it was great. I it's been a while since I've seen it, but I don't have any like huge glaring criticisms of it to bring up. I just think it's a good movie overall.
Yeah, I don't either, and I really, really love that first movie, and I think just the way, I was so impressed with the way that it was animated, and I think that a lot of the time when people just talk about visuals in movies, it almost seems like, you almost wonder if that's going to be a negative, if like all you can think about is how it looks, but the story is just really incredible too, and like I feel like it matches how great the visuals are, and it created not as much of a trend as I would have hoped it would have, but there are so many movies that have taken influence from the style of like kind of skipping frames in the animation since then, and I think it's been used to great effect, and it's nice to see that it, caused some waves in that way, because I think like, what is it, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish kind of uses a similar animation style. In the upcoming, I think, Ninja Turtles movie is doing the same exact type of animation style too. And it's something that, at least as of now, I'm really just not getting tired of. Because anytime I see someone trying to sort of adapt that style and kind of do it again, it's so much more interesting to me than what Pixar has been doing and the way they've been trying to push animation, which is just solely just making things look more and more realistic.
I don't like that. I like it when people, or like animation studios, embrace the medium of animation and do things that like you can do in animation and like use it as like a creative form of art, versus just like, how realistically can we render the water?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And you know what? There's a scene in, have you seen Toy Story 4?
I haven't, just because Toy Story is like over for me, if that makes sense. Like,
I totally respect that, but I think if anyone has, they'll know what scene I'm talking about. There's an opening scene where it's raining, and it just looks incredible. Like, it really does. It looks so real, but no one is really talking about the way that Pixar is animating movies anymore. No one. There was a long period of time where after any new Pixar movie came out, people would, I think, leave it talking about how incredible it looked. But I think that's kind of stopped, because I mean, Lightyear looked good. Like it was very competently made, but it just looks like there's stills of it that look like they could be from like a CGI, like live action movie, basically. And I just don't think that's the right way to go. I think that it's animated. Like, why do you want it to look photorealistic? There's so many more interesting things you can do with that. And I think that going into talking about Across the Spider-Verse, I think that this pushes that even further, which I wasn't sure how they were going to do, but I was really just blown away by the way that this movie looked, and I've never seen anything like it, and I don't know if we'll see anything like it in the future.
I loved it. I loved how all the different worlds had their own distinct art style, and they also, when all the different Spider-Men were interacting with each other, it clashed, but it worked in the clash. Like, it didn't look jarring.
Yeah, and I loved that, and I'll sort of give a quick little synopsis before we jump into it anymore, but Miles Morales catapults across the multiverse, where he encounters a team of spider people charged with protecting its very existence. When the heroes clash on how to handle a new threat, Miles must redefine what it means to be Spider-Man. And yeah, I totally agree that it's something that is certainly really challenging to do, to blend so many different styles. Because, and I think the best way to like jump into talking about it is just how different Gwen's, because this whole movie starts off with like almost, I feel like a 20-25 minutes like prologue.
It's almost like a
with,
different start to a movie.
Yeah,
it's almost
it feels like
starts.
it's like a Gwen Stacy movie.
Yeah,
and just the way that her world looks is so much different than his world, and it's just it's so effective. And from what I've read online about it, it's a lot of her comic book style was very like watercolor painting, had like a painterly look to it, and they tried to adapt that for this movie, which I thought was just so cool and just creates like a nice contrast. And there are so many scenes, like there's a scene toward the end, and I'm sure you know which one I'm talking about, where she's having a conversation with her dad, and the backgrounds just keep changing to sort of reflect how they're feeling in the scene. And I just thought that was so cool. It's like, it's almost, it's just as engaging as like an action scene would be, but you're just, you're using the animation to actually, not just making things look photorealistic behind them, or like just, it wasn't a distraction. It just felt like it blended. It was part of, it was part of the scene. It felt like it was alive, and I love that so much.
it was really pretty. Okay, we got to get into it. Have you seen the like Gwen Stacy is trans discourse online at all?
Yes, definitely.
And you've seen like the backlash to it?
I haven't looked too much into the backlash, but I'm sure I could guess.
I mean, it's literally just people being like, "No, she's not trans," and like people just fighting over it. Before I give my opinion, I'm curious. Like, what is your opinion? Do you see this as like a trans character or a trans coded character from just your opinion?
I will admit, when I first watched it, even before reading anything online, I thought you can take it that way. Like I think that, I mean, her dad, it has like a protect trans kids. I think there's like a protect trans kids flag, and then there's like a pin somewhere too, and just her whole her whole arc of not wanting to, her father just not quite accepting her for who she is, and just that whole arc of him. I mean, we are going to get into spoilers. So when he does kind of accepts her for being Spider Gwen at the end, it does. I can definitely see how people are interpreting that way. I'm not sure if that's the direction that they're going to go, just for the unfortunate like financial reasons. But I think that it's going to be coded that way, and they're going to make it ambiguous to where you can read it that way if you want to. I think it would be really fucking cool if in the next movie they reveal it more overtly, but I don't know if they're going to do it. They're already getting banned.
I don't think they will.
It's already getting banned in certain countries because of that. And there's just no way a company like Sony is gonna allow it for that reason. But I think it might be there. I think it might be there.
It got banned because of the flag on the wall, not because they explicitly say like this character is trans.
Yeah, so if they were more explicit, it would just be, it might even get banned in more places, which is really shitty. But I still think it's a step, and I think it's cool that that they're kind of pushing this in what seems like a more overt way than I would have expected. What do you think about it?
At first, when I saw, because I saw the people being like, "Oh, she's trans," like right away before like I saw like the movie, and I was like, okay. And then when I went to go see the movie, I was like expecting something a bit more explicit. And I think, because the biggest thing is like, because they don't actually say it, like no one actually says anything. So you're kind of like inferring from what the movie shows you. And yeah, her world where it's all watercolory, and the scene is like literally trans colors of like the pastel pink, blue, and like white on her. And then she's got like, her spider outfit has like kind of like trans colors, and I definitely see it. Also, like the way that she kind of looks physically and her vibes, like someone posted like a screenshot of when she's going to her high school dance, and she's wearing like that outfit where it's like, what is it, like a long like dress, and then she's got like a leather jacket with pins all over it, and people are just being like, it's giving like strong like basically like trans girl energy. And I definitely see that. I keep thinking about like, because the whole thing with her dad is like, he's just kind of like, isn't it just kind of like it seems to me that they were kind of at odds, because she was like an awkward teenager who her friend had died, and then like you know what I mean? Like, they had, like, some tension over that. I wasn't necessarily reading, like, tension over, like, her, like, identity, but I don't know. I guess I'm not explaining this right. I didn't necessarily see it as, like, him not accepting her because, like, the unspoken, like, subtext was that she was trans. It was more just, like, awkward teenager / my dad's a cop / my friend got murdered vibes.
Yeah, and I think that I feel like they want you to infer the other Spider-Man aspects of it too, which is that she's a vigilante. She's not, she's going. She's not following the law like to a T like a cop would, and I feel like that's another aspect that that Captain Stacy is just not willing to accept. And I think that it's definitely not as overt in this, but I think that there's just with this movie, there's just a certain understanding that they expect everyone to have about Spider-Man lore, so they don't like re-explain some of those things. I feel like that's what it is, but I think you can read it in that way, like in terms of like the trans allegory. But I do like that it's not, I guess, beating you over the head with it, even though some people say that it's so obvious. I kind of appreciated that it was a little bit more subtle. But how do you feel? Would you much prefer it if they just spelled it out and made it more obvious, or do you like that it's a little bit more subtle? How would you feel if they, because I think there are going to be a lot of people that are frustrated if they don't make it more overt. Do you think that they should? Would you prefer if they did?
Obviously, just for like the way that the political climate is now, and like money and all those factors, like it's never gonna come out as like an explicit character for like this specific project. I'm not talking about like everything. So them kind of like them as in like the animators and the people who are making the movie, kind of like it seems very like strongly imply that this is the direction that they were going up until the point of like them saying it. And some people like talk about it in the trans community, like we don't want like characters where it's kind of just implied, like we want explicit declarations of like this is what this character is. But then I see some people talk about how they don't want trans stories where like some person will just be like, yeah, I'm trans, it just gets like mentioned offhand. Or like they also don't want trans stories where like the entire thing is like a fucking tragedy kind of thing, like the person's coming out and then like dealing with like the coming out process. So like, I guess I don't really know. Like
it seems like it's really complicated, and I've always never really I never really know how to feel about it either, because I can kind of see both sides to that argument too, because you don't want it to come off as like just a tokenized thing that just becomes all people think about that person and their identity. You want, even if it is part of it, you don't want it to be stereotypical, you don't want it to be just super obvious. But it's hard, because I do understand, I also understand the people that do want it to just be like, fuck you, this is overt, like this is in your face. Like I get that too in some ways, but I think a lot of the time that can feel a little bit hollow and a little bit corporate-y, like a little bit like we're trying to push this because I don't know. I don't know if I'm saying this in the way. I don't know if I'm saying this in the most eloquent way, but it's just really complicated.
I think the problem with this is when it comes to like telling a story that has like a trans person in it, or like a trans specific story. It's like, well, how do you show that they're trans? And it's always something about like showing like a before and after, or showing something that they have to do when it comes to like their their transition, you know what I mean? And I think in a lot of ways, like if you're not showing that, like if you're not showing a before, if you're not showing them like doing something explicitly like for them being trans, you know what I mean, like getting surgery or like talking about it or anything like that, I think that what it comes down to is like trans people are just like normal people.
Yeah.
So they're almost, it's kind of weird, because it's like my entire life and like my interests and everything about me isn't like centered around like me being trans. Like it's not like everything for me. So like if I was gonna have like a story written about me, like I wouldn't want like the entire thing to be about me being trans, because I don't even think that's like the most important part. So I guess like what I'm trying to say is like in some ways I do kind of like that. I guess for the like the political climate that we're in right now, I like that it's heavily implied. Like, if you know, you know, you can see the signs of like this character is very like heavily coded as being like trans feminine. And I think that's cool. Like that's fine. And I also think the bigger problem with all this is the people who are insisting that she isn't is just kind of like annoying in some ways. Like, why are you, I'm talking like people who are like staunchly defending like, no, she's straight, like she's like a cis girl, whatever, like no, or them actually, let's be honest, they're just being like, no, she's a biological woman, or like,
yeah,
whatever the fuck. It's almost like it doesn't matter. Like, this is literally a made up character who's a cartoon, so this character can literally be whatever, like whatever like people see them as is fine. Like I'm definitely the person who believes that once like you make something and you put it out into the world, it kind of doesn't belong to like the creator anymore. It kind of belongs to the people who consume the media.
Yeah.
And their interpretations and their feelings about it, I think, are more important than like what the authorial intent of something was or wasn't. So I think the fact that like a lot of people are seeing this means it's kind of like it's something to acknowledge, and it's valid in my opinion. I don't know. I guess there isn't really enough examples of stuff like this happening where I feel like I can make good comparisons. And
there really isn't. It's kind of I don't know, I feel like it's kind of unprecedented. Yeah, there really isn't another good example of something like this.
No, overall I think it's a cool thing. I don't particularly care if this character is trans or not. Like, that doesn't affect my viewing experience. I'm also not a trans woman, so like I don't know what it's like. I can't relate to it on that aspect, but like just like as a trans person, I think overall it's like, I think it's fine. It's cool. Whatever. It's neat. I think the people who are like really anti like arguing about it, I think you need to like look inward and like, why would it bother you so much if she was? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that if you don't think that she is, that's fine. But
that's
like,
fine.
Why do you have to be so like? Why do you have to be? People are happy. People are excited about it, and people are excited about getting some form of representation, even if it isn't like the most overt thing. Just let people have it. You know, like I don't see why you have to be so up in arms about it. You know, I just
thought of like a really specific example. So, are you familiar with Dragon Ball Z at all?
Not really, actually.
It's okay.
You can explain it, though. I like a little bit. Like, I know, like, just, you know, the most vague things just from cultural osmosis, I guess.
Well, okay, so pretty much everyone in that series is like an alien, and then some aliens are, like, they look more like human, so, like, they will have, like, white skin, and then other aliens will look more alien-like, and they won't have, like, a traditional, like, human-toned skin color palette. And there's a character, Piccolo, and he's like kind of like what you think of like a green standard alien. And I know a lot of people, like specifically, I've seen other like black creators talk about this, how like they really identify with this person, and they're like, Piccolo is black, and it's kind of like, well, he's not literally black, as in like he's a black man. He's obviously like a green alien, but like a lot of his story is similar to like what I've seen a lot of like different black creators talk about. Like, he's basically an adoptive father to someone else's kid, and someone was saying how that's like a really common experience in like the black community, how like there'll be men who are like parental figures to like kids that aren't their own. I'm not really doing the best job of explaining this. Like, I think there's probably like a video essay about like the black culture and like Dragon Ball Z that would explain this a lot better. But the whole like Gwen Stacy trans thing is kind of giving me the same vibes as that. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think that totally makes sense. And I feel like it's such an ingrained part of certain parts of black culture, especially like black like nerd culture. So that makes sense.
I think also, I know that like a lot of people in Mexico really like Dragon Ball Z. So there's something about Dragon Ball Z that really speaks to a lot of like different like people of color like communities, and that isn't speaking to white people in the same way.
Yeah,
if that makes any sense. Because like whenever I hear like a white person talking about Dragon Ball Z and they're not talking about it like generally, or like when they're talking about it generally, they kind of like just will compare Goku to being like Superman, and that's kind of like a white reference to me, and it never really goes farther than that. Like they're not really talking about like other characters. But when I see like more discussions about Dragon Ball Z, I definitely see like a lot more like this is like a black coded character, or like this character feels black, or like I see a lot of that. And I think it would be weird if like I was a Dragon Ball Z fan and I'm like fucking arguing with people being like, no, they're not black, they're meant to be like white. Bleh. That seems very odd. And again, I would be like, okay, maybe you should like examine why you feel so strongly about this.
Yeah, and it's everyone comes to any piece of media that they see, whether that's like a movie, a TV show, music, and you come at it with personal experience, and that's how you're going to relate to it. And the fact that so many people are relating to Gwen Stacy through the trans experience, and so many people relate to Dragon Ball Z and certain characters through the black experience, that means something. It's not just like one guy who's like, oh, I feel this way about it. If this many people feel this way, like it's hitting a cultural nerve, and it's speaking to them in a very like impactful, meaningful way. Just let it speak to them in that specific way,
All right, and that concludes the Gwen Stacy Spider Trans segment of the review. And
this will be part 1 of the review. No, I'm kidding. So how did you feel about just Miles Morales' journey in this movie?
I love him so much. Like he's like I love Spider-Man. I think I've talked about this before. Like Spider-Man is my favorite superhero character. Like I grew up watching. Actually, I don't know if like you did this, if you had this too, but like I grew up in Canada when I was a kid, so I saw a lot of really old TV from like the 60s, 70s, and 80s that would just run on different TV show like channels for reruns. So I grew up actually watching the 1960s Spider-Man.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so when I was a kid, I've seen like all of those episodes as a kid, and then also the 90s Spider-Man when it came out, I watched that too.
That was more my show. I never really got into the 60s one too much, but I watched a lot of the 90s show along with... It was, for me, just Spider-Man and Batman were always my two favorite characters, too. Probably Batman a little bit more, but I was very into that 90s Spider-Man show.
And then when the... the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans came out, that was, like, my jam for a while. Like, I can't even tell you how many fucking times I've watched those movies. Like, I love them. Anyway, so I really like Spider-Man. I'm getting back to Into the Spider-Verse. I love how the design of this character, literally, like the Spider-Man suit, is that anyone could be Spider-Man. Like it's even referenced in the first movie where they talk about like maybe there's like they're interviewing like people on the street and they're like, who do you think Spider-Man is? And they're like, maybe Spider-Man's a woman, and it's like. It literally could be anyone. Yeah. Because it's just like I love that. And I think Miles is I haven't read like the comics he's in, but I'm just going off of like the Spider-Verse movies. But I just really like his characterization. I think he's a cool character. I like the relationship he has with his uncle and the dynamic he has with his mom and his dad. I think it's just fun. I like his character a lot. I also sometimes I feel like the main character in a movie can sometimes be the least interesting character, and like the supporting characters are all more interesting.
Yeah, sometimes they just don't have enough personality, and they just feel like protagonist number 0063 or something, like Harry Potter. There's really no personality there. But yeah, I agree. Miles has a lot of character, and same thing. I feel the same way about Gwen. And what I really like about Miles Morales and Gwen is I feel like there are so many movies that try to capture being a teenager, and just the characters come off as rebellious, but also just very annoying in being rebellious, and you kind of almost understand their parents and like why they're so frustrated with them. And with this movie, I feel like they balance it a lot better, and I think that it feels like it rings a little bit more true. And they just don't come off as annoying teenagers. They come off as just flawed people who are trying to grow up and move on in their lives, which I really appreciated.
I think you really hit the nail on the head with that. Like sometimes teenagers in media are depicted as like little shitbags, and you have no empathy for them, but they do a really good job of making you like feel for all the characters.
Yeah, and you know, and something as simple as Miles, just he's getting older. He has a responsibility as Spider-Man. He wants to continue with his education and impress his parents in that way. He wants to make sure he's being a good son and, you know, showing up to his family's like events and parties on time. And it's really difficult to juggle. And that's something that any younger person or any older person can relate to. It's like sometimes it's really difficult to juggle all the things you have to do in your life. And that's something that's you get better at growing up. And it's a more relatable problem, like showing up late to something and just kind of feeling like you're disappointing someone that you care about. And just you can understand both sides of it. Like if just I'm just referring to Miles like being late to his dad's birthday party, because it's like it's definitely a shitty thing for him to do, but you understand why. Like he has a lot of fucking shit going on in his life. And that's what I've always loved the most about Spider-Man. And I think that what Spider-Man does better in its best incarnations than any other superhero is just capturing that the pull between both worlds, between the person's personal life, or between Peter Parker or Miles Morales' personal life and the superhero life, and just how difficult it is to balance those two things. But usually it's just the family angle and the personal life angle is so, in the best Spider-Man stories, is so strong, and it's just so perfectly rooted in that it enhances the superhero stuff, because it makes you care about, you know, who's underneath the mask like so much more. And I've always felt that Spider-Man balances that the best, and I think this movie does a great job with that.
I really like tell me if you notice this, how all the different variations of Spider-Man or Spider-Woman, or like Spider People, or Spider T-Rex, fucking
There's a Spider Horse. There's a Spider Horse.
All the different variants of these people, they all have a lot of very similar mannerisms and senses of humor. And like, obviously we go into like the canon events of like whatever happens in everyone's, like, a Spider-Man's life. But like, do you remember the scene where Miles is talking to Spot and he's like, why are you calling it an ATM machine? Like that seems redundant. And then later on when we're introduced to Pavarker, I'm probably not saying that right, Indian Spider-Man, Pav, as they call him, and they talk about the chai tea thing.
Yeah, I actually didn't think about that. That's really good writing.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot of little subtle things they do to not just have it be like a copy paste, but like show that like these are like literally different universe variations of like the same kind of essence of a person going through things, and they share little common things. I don't know. I just like that. I think that's really cool.
I feel like a story like this about a character that everyone knows that everyone knows so well is just that much more powerful, because it's really, I feel like this movie specifically, and also the first one to a lesser extent, is just really living up to the potential of like a multiverse story could be, because you're really like really grinding down and like with like a mortar and pestle, like what is this character about? And you're really like, you know, and like you mentioned about like there's in this movie, and I'm sure people who have seen it will know what we're talking about. There's specific canon events and things that Miguel, who is one of the, you know, I'd say an antagonist in this movie, but not necessarily like a villain necessarily, but who wants to make sure that these canon events happen because like the fabric of the universe depends on it. It's also kind of to me it seems like a commentary on reboots too, and telling the same story over again, as much as it is a commentary on people not wanting there to be just a black Spider-Man, period. There's a part toward the end of the movie where Miles just kind of says, no, I'm going to do my own thing, and that's just kind of becomes the thesis for the whole movie, which is it's okay to tell, you need to tell these stories in a different way, because it makes me think of even the mistakes that Sony has made. It's almost like this movie is a weird reflection on the mistakes that Sony as a studio has made with Spider-Man in the past, like with Andrew Garfield's Amazing Spider-Man movies, which literally are just doing the same fucking thing. And so many people, I remember after the first Amazing Spider-Man movie, so many people complain like it's just the same thing over again. Uncle Ben dies, and it's a very, very similar scene too, like just the way that it's shot and it's just kind of a slight variation. And other than the villain changing, there's really not much in that movie that's it's kind of like a more, in my opinion, like a more soulless version of the Sam Raimi movie. And I love that this movie's thesis is kind of, hey, it's okay to sort of change these stories and make them a little bit different. And I think that, we'll learn like what their answer to that is, I think, in the final chapter, because there's not really an answer to it in this movie. But I'm really curious, like, kind of what stance they're going to take on it, even though I might be reading into it a little bit too much. But I don't know. I like that, like, there's an essence of what Spider-Man is and what makes him Spider-Man, like you said, like the types of ways that he jokes around and just his heart that he has and how much he cares about his family. But at the end of the day, there are some things that you can change some aspects of the character and not ruin it,
Confession time. Okay, I've told you before how I don't like movies about space. I don't know what it is. I think it's like a lot of anxiety inducing kind of feelings, like the vastness of space just kind of like freaks me out. And I don't like movies or stories about space. I'm not really super into like sci-fi specifically for that. But then I also some of my least favorite tropes are also time travel and then like alternate dimensions or like parallel universes. Like I'm really not a fan of it because I feel like most of the time it isn't done well. And also, like, I hate all like the time paradoxes of like timelines, and like I just hate that in movies so much. But anyway, what I'm trying to get at here is I like how the different realities of Spider-Man and the different versions of Spider-Man isn't so much like, yes, it is about the fact that there's alternate universes, but it's more so about, I feel like it's kind of just more about like reflecting on the different ways your life can turn out. And I feel like that's why I don't find it so annoying and why I actually kind of like how this storytelling is going, because it feels more just like a commentary on the choices you can make in your life and how you can grow up and how you can like live.
Yeah.
Do you get that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just on a very basic level, it's what Miles is doing in the movie is just very relatable, because he feels trapped. Like, you don't want to feel like you can't actually like change the world around you. And it just, on a very base level, like, it's easy to relate to Miles, because by like Miguel and all the the spider people just kind of trying to stop him from preventing his dad from dying, it just feels wrong. Even though, like, if you look at it like the trolley problem situation, like, letting him die would probably save a lot of people if Miguel is right. But yeah, it's just so hard to say, like, no, I guess I'm going to make this sacrifice, just knowing it's going to happen and there's nothing you can do about it. It's just, so I don't know. I think that makes his motivation in this multiverse story so relatable. And I feel like that's for the reasons that you said. It's just why this take on multiverses feels a little bit more down to earth and more personal, just because it is more just about seeing other variations of the choices that you could make, and it allows him to reflect on that.
Can we talk about how we find out that Miles wasn't even supposed to exist? Like,
that's crazy too, and that also feels like a commentary on just there being a black Spider-Man in general and how angry people were. I remember back in the day, I don't remember the story exactly, but someone can correct me if they remember what it was. But there were rumors, I think, of Donald Glover playing Spider-Man, and people were just so fucking pissed about it.
Yeah.
And just being so racist and so awful and shitty. And I think I could be, again, I could be wrong. I might cut this out if I'm just completely wrong. I think that's part of why they created the Miles Morales character, was kind of like a response to that, to say, like, no, like, you can't have a black Spider-Man. And I mean, this is a total side note, but just seeing Donald Glover as the Prowler in live action was so cool. Just knowing that bit of history, like, I loved seeing that.
Well, he played the Prowler in Spider-Man Homecoming.
Right, that too. Yeah. And that was also, so it's kind of like carrying on that little reference, which was also based on the fact that there was so much controversy surrounding like the possibility of him playing Spider-Man for that reason. And there was also like a fun little nod in Community as well, with like, there was an episode where he wakes up like wearing Spider-Man pajamas, like after that whole controversy happened, which is just crazy that controversy was even a thing at all. But yeah, that whole reveal at the very end of the movie of like Miles, being bitten by a spider in a different universe and it being like wrong is just it feels like it makes that theme like even stronger. And I think when we get to the end, I'm very curious to see like how that adds up and where that leads.
Oh, so I guess we can get into the part where we're probably going to have the biggest disagreement is you hated the ending and I love the ending of this movie.
See, I definitely think that this is almost a perfect movie to me. Like I think it's very, very close. Like I can't think of another movie that I felt this way about, because I can understand why someone might like the ending. And I've watched some reviews of people who've hated it, and I've read some reviews of people who have really, really liked it and what it represents. But to me, I know there are a lot of movies that are part ones, and like you could go down the list and name like tons of them, and not even part ones, but just kind of like, there's tons of Empire Strike Backs out there which have like kind of an inconclusive ending. But I just, for me, just I think part of it was going in not knowing that there was going to be a third part, and also just the way that they ramp up the movie again at the end felt like we'd already gotten like the falling action and we'd already gotten a bit of a conclusion, and then it kind of starts up again. And it just, to me, it felt like toward the end we kind of got part of like a whole new movie. Like I probably wouldn't have had as much of a problem with it if they just cut it off maybe like 15-20 minutes earlier than they did. And it's already a very long movie.
Where would you want them to end it?
I think for me, after it's revealed that he was bitten by a spider from a different universe, or maybe even after it's revealed that like the alternate Miles Morales becomes like the Prowler's protege or whatever, I think that would have been a good way to stop it. I know that was like not too far before like where it does actually end up, but it started to feel like when they got back into like Gwen Stacy's storyline, it really just started to feel like they were getting the band back together and it was kind of ramping up again. And I don't know. I feel like when I go into a movie and I expect a little bit more of like a singular experience and something that feels like I could leave it there if I wanted to. And I feel like there are a lot more examples of movies like this. Felt more like The Two Towers or something. And I was actually thinking that too. I didn't go in think I think my issue was I didn't go in knowing to expect that. And I think it really threw me. The more I've thought about it, like it is an amazing movie. And I feel like it is tough to hold that against it, but there's just so many unresolved threads. I feel like even more so than other movies like that. It feels like the second act in like a bigger book. Like if we're talking about like Lord of the Rings or something. And I didn't expect that going in, because the first one is so like self-contained and you can kind of just watch that on its own. But like, I feel like I would never really want to go back to this movie and watch it by itself. I don't think I would ever be able to do that and not just get the itch to see whatever's going to happen next. And I don't doubt that the next part is going to be really, really good based on what they've given us. But we don't know yet. Like, we don't know. Like, what if in like the absolute worst multiverse, the third one is just kind of a letdown somehow? I don't think it will be based on what they've given us. But like, would that affect the way that you see this movie or no? Do you think you would still like if you feel like they fumbled a conclusion? I feel like if they fumbled a conclusion somehow, I do think that would affect the way I see this movie, since it's so closely tied to it, you know?
Okay, I can agree with that point. Like if the third one does absolutely like just blow chunks, then yeah, it's probably gonna sour this movie. But that is kind of like a Star Wars problem, like with the newer trilogy, where they were all connected, and then like, I mean, people argue whether or not The Force Awakens was good, but the arc between all the movies does affect how it's going to go. But like, we are talking about like something's going to happen in the future, so I don't know what's going to happen in the future. But right now, in this moment, I'm happy with the way the movie ends, and I think sometimes, I don't know, I guess you can tell me if you think I'm wrong, but I'm okay with a story that has a cliffhanger, and I'm okay with it being good setup for the next part of the story. Like, I'm okay with that. I don't need everything to be self-contained. I do think for what this movie was, it was self-contained in the fact that like we got the story beats down of what needed to happen for this. Like, we saw the next phase of like what it's like after Miles has been Spider-Man for a while, and then finding out that he wasn't even supposed to exist. Like, that's good for me. Like, that's enough for me, and I'm happy with it. I'm glad that we got to see that the spider that was originally for the different universe, when it left and bit like the Miles we've been following, that created Miles that becomes the Prowler in like the Spider's original universe. I like that we got to see that. I think if they revealed that at the beginning of the second movie, it would have felt like, I don't know, weird in a way.
Yeah, I think revealing that at the end of this movie and then just kind of cutting it would have been. I think I would have been a little bit happier with that. But I will say this. I think that I do want to watch this again, and I think I'm going to. I think watching it again, just not. I felt like. I don't know. I was just enjoying it. You can also look at it in this way. I was fucking enjoying it so much that when it cut off, I felt like someone had like punched me in the face. I was like, what the fuck? I really, really wanted more. And you could look at it in that way. I think going in knowing, and if they were like part one, which I think saying part one, here's my theory. I feel like if they did that, that could actually affect how many people go see it. Because it sometimes when something says part one at the end, it just feels like a little bit more of a chore, because it's like, okay, well, if I watch this, then it's like starting a new TV show. It's like, okay, if I watch this, I'm going to be obligated to watch more. And maybe it's just psychologically, it's like people feel like it just feels like more baggage to start a part one. So maybe that's why they didn't bother with it. But I think that's why I actually have tried to tell people like, hey, just go in knowing that. For a couple of the people I've talked to, they've said like it actually didn't bother them. But also I talked to a couple of people where that actually helped to like manage their expectations. I want to watch this again and see if knowing that it just doesn't bother me as much, because it might not. Maybe I might be overreacting to it, but there were a lot of people in my theater that also kind of like gasped. I could hear some like frustration. And again, I think that frustration is not coming from a bad place though. It's not like, oh, that fucking sucked. It was like, oh my God, I want more. Like, I wouldn't quite say it feels like half of a movie. Like, I've seen some people say that, and I actually completely disagree with that. Because you do get the conclusion of certain character arcs, and you get to see, like, massive changes happen in Gwen and Miles' life, and you get to see them make, like, really pivotal decisions in their life at the end, and there is a climax. But it feels like, I guess, like 2/3 of a movie for me. Like, I'm almost expecting the next one to just be like a constant fucking climax. I don't know. We'll see how that goes.
Do you feel that you feel this way because of the current culture of being able to binge TV shows and content?
See, I don't think so, because okay, I know this isn't a movie that you're a big fan of, and actually maybe this is because I know the story a little bit because I've read the book, but I felt like Dune ended off in a pretty good way. Like I didn't feel like it was, and I feel like if someone watched that, they wouldn't necessarily be left in a place where I don't know. I'm trying to find a good way to describe this. I think that there are a lot of movies that I've seen that are part ones or part of like a trilogy or like a bigger series of movies that end off in a cliffhangery type of way, leaving you wanting more, but also feel a bit more conclusive. And this, to me, just the ending really felt like a TV show more so. It felt like tune in next week kind of thing. And I guess it's a little bit cushioned. Like the blow is a little bit softened by just knowing that this movie is going to come out in like the next one's going to come out in March, I think, which isn't, anywhere near as long as I expected.
I heard it got delayed.
Maybe it did get delayed, but still, like it coming out next year, I was seriously like, I didn't know that. And knowing that this one took 5 years, I was like, what the fuck? Are we going to have to wait 5 years for the conclusion for this? And I don't know. It just, it's kind of hard to describe, but it feels, I can think of a lot of other examples of movies where the ending it still feels a little bit more conclusive, and it feels like a little bit more like a whole package. But again, I can't imagine, and I haven't watched it a second time, but I can't imagine watching this after the third one comes out just standalone. I think it would be kind of frustrating to watch this without like seeing the second one as part or the third one, I guess, as part of like a package, because it just feels like there are so many loose threads in a way that in a way that's more like, again, like I said earlier, kind of like Lord of the Rings. It feels like it feels like this is part of like just one book, and you need to see the last one to know what's going to happen, rather than like a trilogy of movies that are connected but feel like individual sort of stories that have a beginning and an end. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
I get what you're saying. I guess, like, for me personally, I'm not interested in just watching, like, the second Lord of the Rings movie, like, the Two Towers, like, randomly. Like, I'm not going to just be like, time to watch Lord of the Rings, time to watch the Two Towers. Like, if I'm going to sit down and watch Lord of the Rings, I'm going to watch all of them, just because I think that's the best viewing experience for me personally. But I will say, I'm okay, like, if someone wanted just to watch The Empire Strikes Back, like Star Wars, I'd be like, yeah, I'm okay watching that standalone movie. And I kind of feel, that's how I kind of feel about this, is like, I don't know, I guess this really just comes down to personal preference. Like, I feel like this story gave me enough where I'm satisfied with it, and I would be okay just going back and watching this one. I don't know. As much as I like the first one, I think I would rather watch the second one over the first one.
I think it depends. I think that I'm going to need to see the third one to really know which I prefer. I think as of now, I would say the first one is like a slight edge for me, because it does feel like it was so surprising, and just seeing that style of animation for the first time, even though this movie pushes it even further. But I think I'm still like slight edged to the first one, but I still, that doesn't make it sound like I don't know. I don't want to give anyone the impression that I don't love this movie. And when talking about the ending, I think some people have gotten that impression that I'm like really frustrated with it, but I'm not. It's like, I want more. It's more of like that type of, that type of feeling. And I mean, I am really looking forward to the next one. But no, I totally agree with you. I think this is, but for me, I guess this feels more like a Two Towers than an Empire. And I guess I kind of expected an Empire from like the marketing and the way that it was pushed, and maybe that is on me. And I've been kind of fighting myself with this ending for a while. I don't think I've felt this conflicted about like a movie that I do really like in a while. And I think when that third one comes out, and when a lot of these things are resolved, I'll I don't know, maybe my opinion will change, maybe it'll say the same. But it has been, I don't know, it's been kind of divisive, and I think that I think the people that are frustrated are, I think it's coming from a good place.
So do you think if someone had told you beforehand, or if you had the marketing, that they're like, hey, this is part one of like two, or this ends on a cliffhanger or whatever, like, would you be okay? Would you be like, oh, would you think you'd enjoy it more?
It's hard to say. I think I would enjoy it a little bit more, because I think just anticipating it, I think would have helped a little bit. But I don't know. It's hard to say. But I do think it would have. I do think it would help a little bit. But I don't know if it would have completely fix it. But I don't know. Again, I do wonder if that would have hurt the movie to just come out and outright say like, oh yeah, this is a part one. You know what I mean?
Well, I feel like if you pay attention to like movie news, like I knew that they were doing 2 sequels. So
I did too, but I didn't know that it was going to be like they were going to be this close to each other. I guess I had no idea what to expect. And yeah, a lot of people, like I talked to a couple people afterwards that were like, oh yeah, I've known that for a while. They've said that they needed to. I think that they were just originally written as like separate movies too. I don't think it was like a situation where it was getting too big and they had to split it, but I'm not totally sure, to be honest.
Could we talk about the other Spider-Man variants that we got to meet in this movie for the first time?
Yeah, for sure.
Who was your favorite out of the new people?
I think easily Spider-Punk. I feel like I loved that character, and yeah, Daniel Kaluuya did like such a great job with that voice, and also just the animation style was just completely insane, and I've never seen anything like that before, and I just can't imagine how difficult it was to do that, to do what they did, and to like integrate kind of like a 2D like paper sort of style like character in like this like 3D world. I thought that character and the character really had a pretty significant part to play in the story too, which I really loved. I didn't expect that, because there were a couple of the side characters that I would have liked to see do a little bit more. But he was my favorite. Like I felt like he really like fit into the narrative really well.
You know what? Someone point. I'm not the first person to make this take or like point this out, but someone else did, and I thought it was kind of fabulous when you think about it. So he literally gives this little speech about like him being like a punk and like anarchy. And obviously, if you know anything even vaguely about this, hierarchies and like government like hierarchies and control and like organizations, they want to dismantle that. And at first, you might be thinking, okay, so why is Hobie, who is like a punk in his like philosophy and an anarchist, like why is he joining this organization which is all about like rules and control? And then you realize that he was the one who helped Miles escape.
Yup.
And like he gave Miles like his own I guess what do you call them, like their wristbands, their stopwatches,
little multiverse wristband things. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, he gave Miles his own version of that. Like he stole parts and he made his own. And then he also like he did the thing with like the electric spider pulse thing. He's like, you need to use the palms, not just the tips of your hands. And someone kind of pointed out that like he's kind of like he's like the Rickest Rick in the situation. Like he's the most Spider-Man spider. Because he's like, essentially, I think this is going to lead eventually to like the collapse of this little organization that Miguel has been running. Like I think Miles is like eventually, I think that's what we're going to see in the third movie is Miles is going to help like take this down, and they're going to stop like monitoring all the spider people and just kind of let them do their thing.
Yeah, I definitely think that too. And
like that's fucking amazing. I'm sorry. I love Hobie. He's great.
Yeah, and it's just he really just embodies like what punk is, and it wasn't just like window dressing, you know. It wasn't just like, oh yeah, you know, it's just a character template, like, oh, he's a punk, yeah, he plays bass or something, I don't know. It really felt like just hit the visual style really like felt like, and I'm not saying I'm like the most knowledgeable person about punk, but it really felt like, you know, that style of like punk artwork on like punk posters and those types of designs, and just the way that they, you know, brought it into 3D just looked so cool. And it wasn't just window dressing. The character actually fit into the narrative in a way that made sense for that character, you know, which I really, really appreciated that. I think that was my favorite alternate Spider-Man in the movie for sure.
Well, part of his animation was, they said it was supposed to be referencing zines or zines.
I could see that.
And it's like when you're like photocopy printering them and you run out of toner and like it's all faded.
That's so cool.
That's what he was supposed to be like, which I thought, I love it so much. Like his character design, like he was the best character in my opinion. Like, well, not like the best character, but he was like the most character I had like the most amount of fun with.
Yeah, I know. I totally agree. And I would love, in all seriousness, like I could see, it would be cool to see this character get a spin-off too. Like, not that every character needs a spin-off, but I could totally see that working well. That or Lego, maybe Lego Spider-Man, but we'll see.
I also really liked, I actually really liked like Indian Spider-Man and like, just like the references they made for that. Like when he calls his city Mumbattan, like it's supposed to be like Mumbai and Manhattan, like smushed together. I thought that was fun. And also, I don't know if you know this, the guy who played him, like the voice, I'm sorry, let me look up his name real quick. It's Karan Soni. That was the person who voiced him. He said in an interview that they actually brought him into like a screenplay session, and they said they wanted like all the references they made when they were showing like the Indian Spider-Man's like city and stuff to be more authentic, and they actually asked him for his input, which I think is so cool. Like that's the kind of thing that I wish they did more of when they were making Avatar.
Yeah, no, I was just editing and listening to that review again, and I was thinking about that as well. Or when you just mentioned that, that's just really cool. It's just that level of, I feel like, I'm trying to think of a way to describe it. It's care. Just the lack of, the level of care and just the lack of ego, and just I think having a singular vision for something is very nice, which clearly this does, because like, you know, Lord and Miller are great at what they do, but part of that is allowing other people in and not seeing other people's creativity as like an impediment to what you're doing, and seeing it as like, this is an asset and you can use this to make it more genuine and be able to like reach more people and just just work on multiple levels, and that it may have not worked on those levels if you were just doing it alone, you know?
Well, I think if they hadn't asked for his help, it would have just been more like generic idea of what a Westerner thinks India is like.
Yeah, it felt very genuine, and it felt very authentic, and it just helped to better paint this picture of like how of just all these different Spider-Men and Spider People, and how just how different they all are, but also, like you said earlier, how there's little nuggets of just similarity between them too. And even though he lives in a different place and there's a different culture, like the heart is still there, and that Peter Parker heart is still there, you know.
We got to talk about our main man, Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099.
Yeah, played by Oscar Isaac.
Okay, so I sent you before we did this podcast. I was like, by the way, I'm going to be referencing this just so you know what I'm talking about. And you watched it, and I just sent you that so you get an idea of. I thought that he was going to have a way bigger role in this movie because of the amount of fucking fan art I've seen of this character is insane, and how many people are just posting edits after edits, like the one I sent you of. I might get banned, but I still like butts. Basically, like showing off his body and like poses they find attractive with the Sir Mix-a-Lot Ride song.
Yeah.
Because people were doing this so much, I thought he was going to be in the movie like a lot more than he was. But I think it's interesting how insanely thirsty people are for Miguel. Which, like, go off, King. You got it. Like, I also showed you, anyone can look this up. They teased him at the end of the last Spider-Verse movie, and if you look at the way they drew his body, and then how they drew him now, it was like he went through a steroid cycle. He
definitely went through a steroid cycle. There's no doubt in my mind. If you look it up, maybe I'll actually throw it up if you're watching on YouTube or whatever. You're not listening. Maybe I'll throw up the TikTok that Tempest is referencing, and like the image. Actually, I'll throw it up. But yeah, come on. He's on gear.
He is. It's. What would you say, like the way they drew him? It was like he gained like 50 pounds of muscle or something.
It's a lot. It's a lot of muscle. He looks like a completely different character, honestly.
Or like he grew up,
still works,
like he was, or like he was a teenager in like the. He was like a teenager in the preview from the last one, and like he aged up like 10 years.
Yeah, after losing his family, he goes to the gym like 3 times a day, like 7 days a week, like after losing his family, and does steroids.
Part of the reason why I think so many people are thirsting over characters like this is because essentially what the spider suit is it's a bodycon suit. It's like skin tight, so you're really just seeing the anatomy of what the body is, but you're not looking at like a naked body. You're just looking at like the silhouette of a body, and he is like someone's super normal idea of like what a masculine male body should look like.
Yeah, he's definitely like 80s Stallone or Schwarzenegger kind of body type for sure.
Which is interesting because a lot of Spider-Men, they're not like fucking like mega jacked. They're more like a slender athletic build. Yeah,
and I wonder if they did that to sort of differentiate him, and since they're kind of framing him as like the antagonist, you know. Maybe they did that as just like a visual difference. You know what I mean?
I guess.
And I really liked. I don't know. I liked his. I just liked his brand of villainy, I guess, because there are so many Marvel movies nowadays in like the MCU where, even in Guardians 3 recently, where the villain is just essential, and also with Kang and Ant-Man, where they're just coming up with different ways to try to justify genocide, and it's just like, okay, like how many of these types of villains, like Thanos, like how many of these types of villains can there be? And I think that Miguel actually has, like, as far as we know, like, he could be right. Like maybe they do need to allow Miles's father to die, like as crass and shitty as it would be, as cruel as it seems. Like maybe he's right. We don't know. We've been given no information that leads us to believe that either one of them is right, you know?
Well, we've seen through his experience that like he tried to skirt the system, so to speak, and it ended poorly for him. And now he's like insistent on like everyone has to follow the spider canon, the canon events, like everyone has to follow the rules. And I think that's a more interesting motivation other than like I just want to kill people.
Yeah, like, well, and it's always just an argument of like, oh, there's only finite resources and we're using up too many of them, so we need to get rid of half of the people. Like, it's always something like that, or like, oh, there's too many. I don't even fucking remember what the.
It's always like stupid, like
is.
like crack pipe, like simpleton, like child villainry, like. What's an evil person? He wants to kill everybody. Like, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and, like, you know, there are some people that are like that, but it just gets a little boring when every single Marvel movie is that where that's the villain, you know? And I appreciate that. I mean, both of the villains in this movie, I feel like, are... And, you know, I think the Spot is who's the other villain in this, is kind of the former, who he's just kind of trying to get revenge on Miles for kind of...
And he's just trying to gain as much power as possible.
Viewing him as a joke. Yeah, I'm just trying to get as much power as possible. But I don't know. I really... And if you think about it, like, Miguel does embody... Like, even though he doesn't have, like, the sense of humor that Spider-Man does, he, like, is the ultimate embodiment of, like, with great power comes great responsibility. Because he wants to make sure that... He really is doing that to like the most extreme degree. He's like, he
believes he's right.
Yeah, he does. And again, for all we know, like he's probably not right. I mean, Miles is probably right because that's the story. But I'm just very curious where they're going to take that storyline and who they're going to make right at the end of the day. I'm really curious because like and you can, again, I feel like you can kind of sympathize with both of them in a way, and not in a way that people were like, I can kind of understand Thanos. Do you remember the people like when fucking the Infinity War came out, they were like, I could kind of understand Thanos' point. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, no, stop. Yeah. Like that's such a weird self-report. Like, but this is like, I think it's very valid to say, maybe he is right. We don't know.
He kind of gives me similar vibes of like Killmonger in a way from Black Panther, where you can really understand Killmonger's motivations and you almost like agree with him a bit.
Yeah.
Of being like, if this is the way that it's supposed to be, then like, yeah, you are right. But you still feel a sense of like, I don't feel like this is right.
Yeah, it feels wrong, like what he's doing, but for all he knows, based on what we've seen happen to him, based on his, world being destroyed, like, maybe he's right. Like, in his own worldview, that this is the only way to do it. But it is really compelling that it's just, I always appreciate when the villain in any superhero story is just so directly tied to the hero in terms of their motivation. And it really feels like two ideologies kind of clashing. And I think that those are always the best, like, hero versus villain dynamic versus, like, again, the villain just going, I'm going to kill everyone. You know what I mean? Like, that's... Which can work in its own right, but it gets tiring when you have, like, a million different superhero movies a year. And just one thing I was thinking of, like, that kept popping into my head, like, halfway through this movie with how much I was enjoying it, was just, like... I don't think superhero fatigue is a thing. Like, I have some friends who are very into Marvel stuff, like just the MCU in general, even the ones that I fucking hate. And they will talk about how, like, oh, well, I think the reason that people weren't as into Ant-Man 3 and some of the previous entries, like Thor, that is partially just superhero fatigue. I think people are just tired of it. And it's like, no, people are tired of bad movies. And
yes,
this is not. There's no superhero fatigue. I did not feel any fatigue during this movie. It was amazing to look at visually. The story was really engaging. Everything about it, I really enjoyed. I mean, aside from like having a little bit of a gripe with the ending, but still, it just felt like there was such a team of amazing, creative, and passionate people that worked on this, and you can tell, like, every fucking second of this, you can tell like how much love and care went into it. And just, I don't see that with a lot of those other superhero movies. It feels like fucking, like an assembly line, It feels like there's like a machine putting them together and they're just dumping them out. And I'm sorry, like, you can't, I don't think anyone can argue that this isn't, like, possibly, like, this series is not some of the best superhero movies ever made,
I will say, like, when my understanding whenever people talk about like superhero fatigue or like I mainly see it like towards like Marvel, and it's kind of more like, so all the original like Marvel movies that were coming out for the MCU were pretty good for the most part, and a lot of them had references to like future stories, so people felt the need to keep up with them, and I think that just kind of got ingrained in people of like time to keep up with the movies, and I think that's where like the fatigue set in of like this isn't fun to keep up with anymore because they're bad. So that's where I kind of see, like, when you say like it doesn't exist, like I understand like when you're saying like the genre of like superhero movies, like I don't think that exists, and I would agree, but like I do think the Marvel fatigue of like the bad movies and feeling the need to keep up with them, like that fatigue exists.
And it's just, I mean, it is just difficult because people just feel a little bit. I'm trying to think of the way to say this. I think people just feel a little betrayed because they have loved. I mean, I've loved a lot of the MCU movies in the past, and I think people just, they expect that quality to stay up. And when you're making like 3 movies a year plus 2-3 TV shows, and you're expecting people to be able to keep up with it, and there's just not as much. It just feels like there's not as much passion being put into it. It's hard to not feel a little bit like burned out by it. And
Yeah.
I don't know if any studio or group of people could make 3 movies like, maybe I'm exaggerating, I think it's 3 movies a year and like 2 or 3 TV shows a year, like,
Yeah.
to make that feel fresh and like each one just feels as exciting as the last. I don't know who could do that. Like, I don't know if anyone could. And like, maybe the answer is to kind of just slow down a little bit. So I think that I think from what I read, this was actually delayed too. This movie was like pushed back like a year, or was it a year or more? I don't remember. But good. Like, let things be pushed back.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
If this next one needs to be pushed back, push it back. Like, just make sure it's good. If it's as good as this one and like well put together as this one, I'll be happy with it. Aside from the weird sound, did you have an issue with the sound or no? Because there's a lot of people online that have talked about that.
So I think I know what you're talking about. I know that you know this, and I'm just going to mention this because I don't know if I mentioned this on the podcast before, but I have like some deafness, so like things have to be like absolutely atrocious for me to notice. So I remember that it was a little hard to hear some of Hobie's dialogue, but
Hobie's dialogue, and like during the beginning, there was like a monologue with it, and it, like your mileage may vary. Like, at whatever theater you go to, you're gonna have a different sound system. You're gonna have like completely different like type of speakers, and it also depends on like the size of the space, how far away you are from certain speakers. But I think generally a lot of people were having issues with the part you mentioned, kind of hearing some of his dialogue, and also I had issues hearing some of Gwen's dialogue in the very beginning, to the point where I was like, it actually fixed. Like, I think it was after maybe like 10-15 minutes I stopped noticing. But like, there was a point in the beginning where I was like, is this just mixed improperly, or like, is this the theater that I'm in? And I wasn't sure, but it fixed and I was able to hear it. But I think a lot of people were having issues. But they're actually re-releasing like a new version with like a new sound mix. Like, I think all of the versions of it that are playing in theaters now have like the updated sound mix, which again, that's not like, it's not a huge deal, to be completely honest. Like, it's that shit happens. I mean, it happened with Tenet as well, except Christopher Nolan was like, fuck you, which is the difference.
Oh my god. Did you know? Okay, so you said you noticed it, but like it didn't make it like unbearable for you. Like, you got through it.
It didn't make it unbearable, but it was mostly in the beginning. There were a couple scenes where I was having trouble hearing what Gwen was saying in the very, very beginning. And it was just like the music just seemed louder than the dialogue, like a lot louder. And it kind of just seemed like she was whispering almost. It was like her volume was just a lot lower. But it's not that isn't as interesting to talk about. It just seems like it was like a genuine like error more than anything.
Can we end this on a rant of me talking about movie theater etiquette? I feel like you and I have fundamentally different experiences when we go to theaters, because you seem to always be like happy, and I almost never hear you complaining about having really bad experiences. And it seems like ever since like the pandemic started back up, and like when movies, started going out again, like people started going to the theater again, I feel like people forgot how to like behave in a movie theater. And I'm reaching my breaking point, man. Like, I, I can't take this anymore. So you and I joke because isn't your favorite theater Alamo Drafthouse?
It is, and okay, if you come to visit, I'm gonna have to take you to ours because I really do think ours is good. I think that it's possible that there are certain locations that just maybe the quality control isn't there, but okay, you can get into your story, but I just they're like no talking and like no like being on your phone, whatever policy. Maybe that's not your. I know you have other issues with it, which I think is totally fair. Just like the idea of having waiters kind of coming in and out and like doing stuff, and it can definitely be done in a good way and in a way that's very obtrusive and annoying. But usually, people shut up in the area, the theater that that I typically go to. So I do appreciate that. But what's your story?
So I've been to Alamo Drafthouse twice. Once was when I saw the original Aquaman movie, and that was fine. I actually got like a milkshake that time, and I was like, okay, this is cool. You can get food at the theater. And then I went again, like for another time, to go see the newest James Bond movie that came out. And I kid you not, I feel like everyone in that fucking theater entered like an eating contest.
Oh God!
Like the theater was packed. And I swear to God that people were ordering like full entree, full bucket of popcorn, full like alcoholic drinks, like the specialty martinis that were coming back out, and then appetizers. And it felt like the entire fucking time in that theater, there was just waiters like zipping and zooming through all the fucking aisles bringing food. And typically when you go there, they have a little piece of paper, and if you want to order something, you write it on, and then like you put it up so then like the server can come see it and get it, and they're not supposed to interrupt you. Not only were they fucking walking in front of me the entire time, like not bothering to crouch or fucking anything, but they kept asking me if like I had wanted anything or if I'd missed, like if I needed help, like being explained to me like how to fill out the menu or some shit like that. And not only that, so I wasn't eating or drinking anything. I went to this theater because someone else fucking wanted to, by the way, not because I picked it. And just sitting next to people, like the person next to me, I swear to God, it was like they were eating out of a pig trough.
Oh God!
It was just like it was terrible. It was terrible, and you can't fucking say anything because this is literally what the theater is designed for: is like people to eat food while they're there. I can't. It was unbearable of an experience for me. Like listening to people eat. Everyone in the theater was just like chowing down the entire fucking time. Yeah, and that food isn't cheap. Like it's like got a premium price to it for the most part. Also, it's not that fucking good. This isn't like some Gordon Ramsay 5-star like Michelin restaurant. It's like someone's making food in the back by like cutting open a bag and then microwaving it. Like this isn't that great, and people were like, I can't get enough, and they just kept ordering. Oh my God.
That sounds, oh man. No, there is one location that's not the one that's closer to us. I don't want to be specific, that I really, really don't like. That I also have had similar issues. Like the waiters just kind of, because usually they like everything's spaced out like at the good ones, so that when there's like when you're stepping into the seats, it's a little bit higher, and they kind of have like a smaller area they can kind of crouch and like walk under, so they're not like obstructing your view or anything. And usually they will, I don't know, especially if you get there like kind of earlier, a little bit earlier than the movie, you can order then, and maybe they'll talk to you a little bit then. But usually during the movie, they're never supposed to say anything to you, like unless it's like an issue or something that you're having. But yeah, I have had instances at certain locations that aren't as good, where they'll just be like talking at full volume, and it's like, okay, I don't think they know how this works. Which it might sound like bougie to people listening, I don't know, but that's just kind of the experience that you expect from it. And yeah, I've definitely had, but I've had way worse experiences just at like AMC or Regal theaters with people just being. I will never go
to an AMC theater again. I'd rather die. Like I don't care if it's like the only movie theater around me in like 50 miles. Like I'm fucking never going to an AMC theater again. The last time I went to an AMC theater was I went to go see Avatar in 3D because my partner wanted to. I saw it twice. I saw it in 3D and then the normal 2D. And we went to the AMC theater, and there was a fucking Okay, so not only are these seats like it's like a stadium seating or something, I guess, because like that theater was really big. These seats are really fucking small, especially if you're used to the Dream Lounger seats. So they're really small, and it's like a baseball game where you know when like the seat like folds up and you have to like pull it down, and they're really narrow. And someone was fucking kicking me the entire fucking movie. Yeah, I can't.
That's insufferable. I've had similar experiences with AMC, honestly, and just for that, I don't know. I feel like I always have issues with people. Like there's usually like just a loud group of teenagers or something that just won't shut the fuck up throughout the whole movie, and that's just like the bane of my existence. Just no solution. There's no solution. Like you can't do anything about it. Like you can't if you talk to like somebody working there, like those poor fucking people don't want to deal with that.
Oh, God,
and also they're not going to be able to deal with that. And if you try to deal with it yourself, like they're either going to get into a shouting match with you or try to fight you, or there's no way to do it. There's no way to be like, hey, can you be a little bit quieter? There's just no way to do it. It's never gonna make the experience better. Usually my strategy if I'm in a theater, like if I have to go to an AMC or something, which I have not gone to in a very long time, I'll just if I have an issue with people talking loudly, I will literally just walk and leave and go up to the very front. Even though that's annoying to like have to look up, it's like if it's a little bit further away, I'm not going to be distracted. Because my problem is, I mean, I definitely have ADHD, and if someone is talking, I will just hone in on that conversation, and I'll know exactly what conversation they're having, and I'll just focus on that because that's just the way that my brain works, and I cannot focus on the movie, so it makes it really hard. So that's partially why I prefer Alamo, but I know that comes with it does come with another set of problems if you go to like certain locations that aren't like managed or run as well, for sure.
For me, I have like a different level of expectations. Like if I go see a children's movie, I don't expect it to be like perfectly quiet because
me too. Yeah.
Like kids, obviously the movie is for kids. People are going to bring their kids. Sometimes kids are loud and annoying and they're not sitting in their chair quietly paying attention watching the movie. That is fine. I think it's weird if you're complaining about that. Like I remember one time, don't ask me why, my partner wanted to go see Minions and that was fucking like there was basically kids screaming the entire fucking time when we went and saw Minions.
Doesn't surprise me.
But also, like, I'm not going to complain about that.
Of course. Like, during the Mario movie, there were kids that were, like, really loud throughout the whole movie. Like, not throughout the whole movie, but they were, like, talking and stuff. But, like, that's a children's movie. Like, it's fine. I don't mind. Like, same thing. If I saw Minions or something, like, I wouldn't expect it to be, like, super quiet. But, like, once you get to, like, the PG-13 level, I expect people to be quiet.
Yeah.
You know? That's usually my threshold.
When I went to go see, what was it? I think I saw, like, the second Venom movie. Someone brought their fucking baby into the theater. And I legitimately, it got to the point, because the baby kept, like, fussing and crying. And I wanted to go up to that person and, like, hand them $50 and be like, can you just come back another time and watch the movie?
Like, holy shit. Oh man, I can't even remember. I can't even recall an experience where that's happened, where I've dealt with, like, a crying baby in the theater. That's so insufferable.
It's so awful because this isn't like an airplane where it's like, well, what are they going to do? Like jump out of the plane? It's like, no, you can leave if you're.
Yeah, and you have to travel with kids sometimes. Like I understand that. But like, yeah, you don't have to just you gotta get a babysitter, especially if it's Venom. Like like your kid isn't like watching Venom and like enjoying it or understanding it. Like it's not like like fucking the Mario movie or something, which makes sense to take your kids to, you know.
So my thing that I've been hating with my theater lately is I noticed this when we went to go see Into the Spiderverse. So we buy our tickets. Well, I always try to buy our tickets ahead of time because I like getting good seats and they do assigned seating. And this is just like a generic theater. I don't even know if it's a chain. And it's fine. It's whatever. But lately, whenever I go there, there's always like people next to us. Bleh. There's always people next to us, which is fine. But the people last time, it was like a family and it was like parents and like teenagers. And I don't know what the fuck they were doing, but the people next to us like kept getting up, leaving like for 20 minutes and then coming back like the entire fucking movie. And I'm like, are you even enjoying this movie at this point?
What are you doing?
I don't know what they were doing. I don't know, right? I want to know, like, what the fuck were they doing? Like, if I always try to go to the bathroom before I go sit down to a movie, but if I have to, like, go to a bathroom during the movie, I, like, make it really fucking quick, and I get back here, and I try to be, like, as non-intrusive as possible. All of them were getting up and leaving the entire time. The entire time. And they were also, like, talking to each other the entire time. Like, it'd be like, oh, she's gonna go, okay, she's gonna come back, okay. Oh, she's got to get up to go now. Can you go with her? All right, okay, we'll see. We'll let you know what happened, like, when you get back. The entire time!
That is
the whole fucking movie.
I honestly don't know how you even enjoyed it as much as you did. That would actually be, like, that's the shit that I fucking hate the most. Like, when people just are explaining what's happening as it's happening, it's like, please. Like, horror movies are the worst for that. Like, I usually don't like to see horror movies in theaters. I actually really... Yeah. I know you're not into horror movies. I actually really like horror movies, and I just can't... I can't see them in theaters. Like, it's just... It's infuriating for that reason. People just will, like... And again, yeah, like, there are some stupid horror movies where you can predict what's going to happen, whatever. But, like, just having people just calling out what's going to happen or laughing, it's just, like, it just ruins the atmosphere of it and just kills it for me. Like, I can't do it. But that sounds insufferable. Like, I would not be able to deal with that shit.
If there's ever a video of me online where it's, like, tranny screaming in movie theater at moviegoers, like, it's me. You know it's me.
I will fully support you if you want to scream at somebody at a movie theater for doing that, because it's like, I actually do genuinely think, just be respectful. People are, like, tickets are really expensive now too. So, like, yes. And also you're not in your living room. Like, I think that's one thing the pandemic has ruined, or well, obviously there's a lot of other things that ruined, but
all the death and families being changed.
This is the most important thing that the pandemic ruined. But I think people are just more used to being in their home watching stuff, even more than before. And I think that's probably why that's just kind of being, like, copy pasted into the theater. And I think it's especially worse for, like, bigger movies like this, like, where it's, it's not just like it's not just like a solid core of, like, moviegoers that go to see a lot of different things. It's just some people just go see the really big movies that come out, and that's it.
Yeah.
You're just gonna get, like, a different type of crowd and people who don't go to the theater as much. And I feel like you're gonna deal with that shit, like, more often than if you were going to see, like, a smaller movie or some indie movie or something,
Mm-hmm. Man, I miss. There was a theater when I was in college, where it was like $2 to go see a movie, and it was a really old building, like, it was built in the 1920s, and we would always, there wasn't assigned seating, so it was just, like, first come, first serve, but we'd always try to get there, and we'd go in the back, and there was an outlet in the back, and then one time we brought a toaster and some bread and, like, jam, and we just made toast and ate it during the movie.
That's amazing. I remember you telling me that before. I love that.
So I can understand why people be like, Tempest, why are you complaining when you were, like, the guy eating toast in the movie theater? But, like, you don't understand. Like, this was, like, kind of like a dive bar movie theater. Like,
then it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter. But my idea of, like, if you're gonna go to a movie, like just a traditional movie, like, just be quiet, don't use your phone, don't talk. If you need to get up, make it, like, as inconspicuous as you can. And if something happens, like, someone's calling you or there's an emergency, just fucking leave the theater and go.
And I would say, like, even if you're at a movie theater that serves food or whatever, try to eat during, like, the louder scenes. Like, don't, like, if it's, like, a really quiet, like, emotional, like, scene or something just more where the music isn't as loud or just the movie isn't as loud, just wait a couple minutes for it to get louder before you start, like, just chomping as loudly as you possibly can, There
was someone, I'm pro, like, bringing your own food to movie theaters.
Oh, yeah, you should.
Like, yeah, there was someone who, when I went to go see Spiderverse, where they had, like, a can of soda, and there was a really quiet part, and they opened the can of soda at the really quiet part.
Just, like, I don't know. I can't do that. I just can't. Like, I will seriously, like, if I'm at Alamo, like, there were moments where I can't remember what I got. I think I just ate, like, I was eating some fries or something. I think it was, like, pickle fries or something like that. And I was eating them, and it got to a really quiet scene, and I will just stop, and I'll just wait until it gets to a louder scene, because I know it's gonna be it's a superhero movie. There's gonna be an action scene soon. So I'll just wait. I'll wait until it gets a little bit louder, because I just don't want to be that person. I don't know. I can't. It's just, it bothers me, so I don't want to do that to other people,
I feel like there's no sense of, like, caring. I don't know what it is. It seems like no one cares what other people, like, when I'm in public, I try to be, like, as respectful of the fact that I'm sharing space with other people as I possibly can. And I just feel like we need to start enforcing that as a culture, because I hate this like individualistic attitude of I don't matter, or like I'm the only one who matters. I can talk during the movie. I can get up 50 times in a row. Like it doesn't fucking matter. Like I don't need to care about other people's experiences here. I hate that.
I hate it too, and it's made the theater going experience worse. You know, there's a reason why. I mean, I think obviously the bigger part of the reason why more people aren't going to the movie theaters is, you know, it's expensive and it's just easy to watch. It's easier to watch stuff at home. Like people don't have to get a sitter or whatever to watch, like, what is it? I don't know, Secret Life of Pets 2 or something with your kids. You can just watch it at home. I don't know why that's the example I used, but it's very specific. But I don't know. Like but I think that's another reason. I think it's not. I mean, Red Letter Media make fun of it all the time, and they fucking hate going to theaters. And I don't agree with them on that point. I actually, when I get a good theater going experience, it's like one of my favorite things in the world. Like it really is. Like I really love it so much. Like just seeing a movie that the crowd is enjoying. Like it's so fun. It's such a fun thing to be a part of, and that's why it sucks when it's so much when it's ruined and people just, you know, just treat the movie theater like it's their living room. You know what I mean?
You know what's crazy? So I this is one thing I've noticed in the area I live in. People will be loud and annoying and fuck during like the actual movie part. But I don't go to theaters, like even if it's packed, like no one's cheering, no one claps during like exciting part. Like that doesn't happen. It's kind of eerie because I see videos sometimes online of people like they'll sneak like you know, like bootleg phone clips of like theater reaction to like Thor dropping in Wakanda in like, you know, Infinity War, and like the crowd would be like screaming. That like when I went to go see Infinity War when that happened here, that didn't happen. Like everyone was just quiet, like politely, just like, ah yes, Thor is here now. And
see,
like no
that's
one.
funny. Okay, because I can distinctly remember like that moment in Endgame when Captain America gets Thor's hammer. Like the entire theater that I was in just started like screeching. Like it was, but it's fun. Like some people really hate that. Like I saw a thread on Twitter the other day. Let me repeat that. I turned away from the mic. I saw a thread on Twitter the other day of just, it was someone from the UK. I mean, fuck them already, I guess. But like saying like, oh, do Americans really cheer in theaters? Is that a real thing? And it's like, you know, I can understand why people think it's corny because it's not like a drama. It's not like a theatrical performance. Like you know, you're not watching a play where there's actually people that you're cheering for. But to me, it feels more like you're kind of like gesturing and showing to the other people around you that you're just having a good time, you're having fun. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. Like I'm aware, but like when I watched, I think one of the most fun theatrical experiences I had was watching I think it was the 6th Rocky movie in the theaters, and just people cheered during that movie like you were at like a live sporting event, and that was just so crazy. Like it was so loud and just insane, and that's fun to me. I do enjoy that, but it's got to be the right audience and it's got to be the right like atmosphere. But yeah, I feel like the theaters around me are definitely like that.
I think you should go see Spider-Man into the Spiderverse. I think that's my final thoughts.
Yes, and okay, I have one last thing that I wanted to leave this, one last note I wanted to leave this on.
Okay, go for it.
Do you think the canon event for this podcast is you not being able to see Guardians of the Galaxy 3? do you think that if you would have seen that, do you think things would have gone horribly wrong and like we wouldn't have been able to continue the podcast or something? Because I think it's possible. I think that's our canon event.
My canon event is God coming down from the heavens and refusing to let me see Guardians 3. You know, it probably is.
That's the Movieboys. That's the official Movieboys canon event.
It is.
And now you can never watch it though because we don't know what's going to happen.
Oh.